What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Lab, MLB Series Preview Edition. The second time I think we're going to go through some of these weekend series. So, episode number 4 with some really solid matchups on the slate for starting today and this weekend. Pretty excited to get into it. Had some decent angles, I guess, last week, minus Brian Wu, who absolutely shoved, but the rest of it went pretty well. So, I think we have some pretty good pitchers to attack in this slate. It'll be a little different though because this slate of games, while like there's a lot of good matchups out there, I think they're very concise into a few less series than usual. So like I'll be spraying the board thoughts wise at least of what I'm telling you guys on here, probably a little less, and just zeroing in on a couple of these series that I feel pretty strongly about. So it'll be a little bit like that, but I did want to start a little differently because there's a couple teams that I really am just so set on avoiding at this very point. And it's not because of like I'm salty because I lost bets on them or anything, but they're either just hurt or playing really bad baseball. So I wanted to kind of frame that before we started and get in. Because there's 4 teams who maybe I would target them in some form or fashion this week, but I'm not sure that it's all that worth it. And this team I probably wouldn't target at all this weekend, but the Giants can start here. They are super injured right now. That lineup is going through turmoil. They also just had like a really tough series here. Zoom in a little bit against the Pirates, where bullpens were taxed heavily through this, and I guess we'll talk about bullpens in a second. But a lot of like high stress situations, and the lineup like it kind of showed up against the Pirates, which is a little bit surprising, especially when people didn't expect it to in a couple of these matchups here. But they're very injured. It's like they're playing. Yes, they won a couple against the Rockies, who are kind of reeling themselves and coming back down from their legacy run. And they won one against the Dodgers. They had a little 4-game win streak there, but just overall, that's a team that, especially when I'm looking at matchups and data, it's a little inconsistent because they're missing guys, and the pitching staff is now in a super tough place with the bullpen game they had yesterday. Blake Snell is coming back, so what do you know what you're going to get from him on a consistent basis? It's just this team is a little tough to figure out, so I'm not going to do my best in trying to like catch the falling knife or snipe the spot with them necessarily, especially when like they're fortunate they got to play the Pirates and Rockies the last 2 series when the injuries got piled up a little higher. But maybe after this weekend against the Mets, you're going to see some tougher competition, some tougher matchups. So that's probably where they're going to start falling off a cliff. But even starting this weekend, I think I'm good, and we'll talk about that series a little bit too. Um, Next team that I'm sure has frustrated plenty of people is the Rangers. I've talked about this pretty much every episode. Just how bad their offense is, especially against left-handed pitching. We targeted them against Rangers Suarez, and he absolutely shoved just like he's done all season. But I mean, the offense is just god awful right now. From hearing Rangers fans complain about the injuries, which I mean, Josh Young is injured, and they have another injury maybe in the lineup. I guess they used the Wyatt Langford excuse, even though he was hitting basically negative points on his average. But that the lineup is the issue. The pitching injuries are not really stacking up. The pitchers have been somewhat fine, and this lineup just can't hit right now. I kind of give them a pass for this whole Philly series. The Philly series, I mean, the Phillies are one of the hottest teams in all of baseball, especially offensively. So like I can let that slide. I'm not going to judge them for that, but it's really what they've done the past couple series before that. Obviously, starting with the sweep in Coors Field that we talked about. I mean, terrible against the Guardians, terrible against the Angels. So like coming into this series against the Twins, there should be a couple spots, or at least would be on paper, to target them for a little offensive bounce back, but I can't say I'm all that interested, to be honest with you. I think for the Rangers specifically, and for those guys at the top, they haven't been able to string together consistent offense from all 3 of the big faces there, Semi and Seager Adolis. Like you get the one-off home run from one of those guys, and everybody else does nothing. Like I have to see a complete performance from that lineup a couple of times before I really start backing this team. So another catching the falling knife that doesn't really have my interest. Next one is a little different. It's the Orioles, which their offense really hasn't been great either. They did just put up 8 against the White Sox yesterday. So, I mean, hooray for them there. Really bad against the Cardinals, got swept. Still, edged out some late runs in the Mariners series. But, like, overall, you look at everything they've been doing over the past month, not great, to say the least. And, like, yeah, they're playing the White Sox this weekend, but for the pitchers that we're talking about here, which I can just flash it super quickly. The White Sox are going to throw Chris Flexen tonight in game 1, Eric Fetty and Garrett Crochet. So not that I don't think the Orioles can win this game or put up runs in this game. Like, the prices for the Orioles in this series with a pretty solid staff of pitchers, if we're talking about relative to everybody else the White Sox could throw at you. Eric Fetty's been good. Crochet has the capability to be really good too. And even though he's a lefty, the strikeout stuff is there. There's a lot of strikeouts in the Orioles lineup. I feel like you're taking a pretty steep price for, a White Sox tax, and I don't think the Orioles at this current state really deserve that. So, I mean, not that I'm going to be laying minus 240 money lines really anytime soon with the Orioles anyway, but it's tough because I think you're paying a pretty hefty price. I don't have any interest in backing them in that series, even though, like, yeah, maybe it's the get right series, but I'm pretty good there. And then the last one, which really, I mean, there's a couple teams more that fit this, but the Cubs, which the Cubs, I'm kind of more on the train of I want to start fading this offense because they've been bottom of the barrel terrible. They've had great matchups over the course of like a couple of these games. Like in Pittsburgh, they had a couple minus Skeens, but Mitch Keller, Bailey Falter, I mean, they should have put up runs there. Smith Shawver came back, should have put up runs there. It's just bad right now for the Cubs. They look lost at the plate. They've done everything to kind of switch up the lineup. First of all, if they put Patrick Wisdom at leadoff, I'm auto fading. I'm taking their team total under. That's the one move that doesn't make any sense to me, but they've tried everything in this lineup. Nothing is clicking right now. So going into face, some really good pitchers in the next week or so, I'm going to be avidly fading this offense. And even if there's a good matchup, which I did try and get involved yesterday with Smith Shawver on the mound and didn't work out. I haven't bet the Cubs all that much really in the past couple of weeks, thankfully, but I did there. They got nothing going. So this team is auto fade offensively right now. They're like the Rangers probably in their earlier stages of that streak. So those are the 4 teams that I would say I really have trouble putting coin on right now. So I think it would be in your best interest to avoid them. That's just my opinion. But we move from there. Can start, the normal stuff with a little bullpen quick look because there's a couple of teams that this is very, very relevant to coming into these series. And we can look right here. I'll just start it off because the team is right on the screen here. The Oakland A's. And this goes for both sides of the teams that played in this series. The A's and Rockies, it was kind of like the Giants Pirates series in a facet that there's a lot of high danger spots for these relievers. Obviously, you see how many pitches we got from all of these guys, back-to-back extra inning games to end the series, especially yesterday's absolutely insane game, which that was one of the craziest games of the year. We had the over 7.5, tied it in the 9th, and what do you know, both teams go into extras and play a game of pandemonium. But beside the point, the A's had pretty much everybody throw in the last couple of days. Same goes for the Rockies. So now they're coming into a series against the Astros, who are one of the hottest offenses in baseball right now, where, they're severely compromised, which Basin Miller, at the very least, at game 1 is not going to be available. You had Belak, who tends to give them a little longer relief at times when they need it. Same with Michael Kelly, who pitched back-to-back days, and they're not going to be available. So the available pitcher is really Urseg, who's been great. He's really a back-end guy. It's really going to be these 3. Austin Adams, Kyle Mueller, TJ McFarland. So good luck against that Astros lineup because you also have Ross Stripling, which we'll talk about going in for game 1, who doesn't usually give them all that much length. And you just saw the Astros as well, as did a lot of these pitchers out of the bullpen. So scary times for them for sure. And then the other end of that series is the Rockies, who, arguably could be in worse shape. Maybe not. They don't have like the stacks of back-to-back days necessarily, except for Beeks and Vodnik, which are not going to be available today. But I mean, Justin Lawrence, back-end guy, tough that I would see him being available. If you see how they utilize these guys too, I wish you could go back a little further, but they try their hardest not to pitch guys back-to-back days. And a lot of that, I guess, has played into the fact that their pitching staff has actually been somewhat decent as of late. So they've been able to kind of utilize them as they see fits. Obviously, there's an off day in there too, which kind of helped, but no off day going into this series against another team that's one of the best offenses in baseball right now, the Phillies. And series is also taking place in Coors. So I don't know. I think recording this pretty early in the morning on Friday, so I might go on Twitter in a couple hours and get a little more scared of the Phillies because everybody's probably going to be on them. They've been wagons printing run lines for like the past month or so, and now they're going into cores off a team who just blew 2 4-run leads at separate times against the A's and traveling with no off day. But I really can't see a situation where the Phillies don't take advantage of this pitching situation. And we'll talk about it too. It also helps who they have on the mound starting for the first couple games. But this bullpen is in really, really bad shape for the Rockies. And not that it's very good anyway, but they're in a tough spot. I guess those are the two, and we'll circle back to this in a little bit. Those are the two that like really stand out as ones to avoid, and not just avoid, but target against them. The other one that's probably worth mentioning is the Giants here. Obviously, Duvall back to back, so he wasn't available yesterday. Didn't need him, so he'll be available. But they got pretty much everybody else pitching in the last 2 days, so it's pretty tough for them too. The thing is, they are going up against the Mets, so who knows, what stress is going to be put on them. I think there's going to be runs at a premium at that series, but that's also a offense that doesn't really strike fear in you. So I would say those are the bullpens that kind of stand out. We can move to the actual series preview and hop right into it. Start with Jays Tigers because the series actually started yesterday. Jack Flaherty against Gosman. Gosman absolutely dealt in that game. Was on the other side, so I mean, shit that there. But now we have another 3 games here, and Alek Manoah is pitching in game 1 tonight. So obviously, my eyes are drawn there. The one thing about Manoah, like I kind of had it in my gut, partially because of what happened the first 2 games of the series, but also just the type of offense the Rays are. The more I sat with that series and sat with that game, that Manoah was going to pitch decently against the Rays, and the Rays, I don't know if they got a little trigger happy, but they're very free swinging. I know that's the type of offense they are, the type of lineup they are. Didn't work against Alek Manoah. They snuck out 2 very lucky wins the 2 days prior, so it was only a matter of time, which kind of sucked. But now Alek Manoah is going to face a Tigers offense that's quite a bit more patient, and also Alek Manoah is coming off of not just 1 day short rest, but 2 days short rest after throwing 100+ pitches against the Rays. And what have I learned from some friends here? You fade a lot of pitchers that are 100 pitches on short rest, and usually it's just a day of short rest, but happens to be 2 days. In the case of Alek Manoah, they've been starting him every Sunday, giving him the full week. Now, not only is he not going Saturday, but he's going Friday. So 2 full days. So I do think this is a pretty sneaky spot. And I'll be honest, do I trust Matt Manning? I guess I forgot to put up there, but do I trust Matt Manning? No, not necessarily in this game. This could be a spot for runs. But I do think Manoah is a little vulnerable against this Tigers lineup. So I do think it's a pretty tough matchup there for him to continue that. Definitely tough scheduling spot as well with no off day. So I do think he gets touched up a little bit just when people are starting to buy back in. Don't have many thoughts on game 2 with Barrios Olsen. I do think Barrios has a pretty solid matchup, but game 3 is probably where my eyes would draw me next with Casey Mize, who I talked about last week or last series preview in that game against the Royals that he started. The Royals hit the ball hard, and they hit the ball in the air a lot. Casey Mize does give up a bit of hard contact, but his saving grace is keeping the ball on the ground. He's one of the best ground ball rates out of all qualified pitchers. Probably has gone down a little bit since the Royals start, but yeah, that's his bread and butter. And the Blue Jays, for one thing, this is going to be an early game. I think I forget which app is streaming the game, but it might be Roku or something. But 11:30 a.m. game, which is kind of weird. 11:30 a.m. Eastern time game. So it's going to be a super early game, and the Blue Jays are going to be facing a guy who keeps the ball on the ground very, very well. So, I mean, the Blue Jays, they have a lot of soft contact in their lineup, period. They hit the ball on the ground a lot. So, I mean, just the spot in the matchup kind of lends itself to a pretty good Casey Mize performance. We'll see what state the bullpen is in there, but I can tell you I'll probably be on Casey Mize in some form or fashion in game 3. So yeah, I think the Tigers have what it takes to potentially savor a split in this series. But yeah, I think Manoah's in a tough spot. I think Mize is in a pretty good spot. Those are where my thoughts lie there. We can move. Not too many thoughts on Braves Pirates. Pirate series was crazy. Maybe like another bullpen that's worth mentioning for them. I can pull that back up. Um, their bullpen's not in the greatest of shape either. After the last couple games here, they've had guys throw a lot of pitches. So who knows who's going to be available against the Braves lineup? But I guess also honorable mention could be the Braves for teams that I don't really care to get involved with finding they're catching the falling knife for their offense because they've also been bad. Looks like we're getting the tentative, as of now. Darius Vines return, so who knows what's going to come there. Bailey Falter's bad, so could come to a head there for the Braves offense. Then we get Ronaldo Lopez, Mitch Keller. Then we get Chris Sale, Martin Perez. I don't feel great about just relying on the Braves bats in this series. I'll be honest with you. Everything on paper kind of screams, at least the first two games, that this would be the get right spot. We've gone through this cycle for maybe a month now, and it hasn't shown itself. So I'm good getting involved. I will say if I had to pick out a spot in the series, definitely would be Chris Sale to have a really good start. I mean, not that that's the hottest take, but he's been absolutely nails really the entirety of the season now. With him, it was always a question of could he stay healthy or not, and right now he's healthy. So I mean, that's a win for baseball fans everywhere. And not that the Pirates have been bad against left-handed pitching, because that's not really the case, but they strike out at a 25% clip. It's good for fourth most in the MLB. And I mean, for transparency's sake, I'll show you, like, they're also, if you look at WRC plus, almost a top 10 offense. So again, they've been good against left-handed pitching. It's just a lot of the pitchers they've faced are not like these strikeout artist pitchers that like are really going to blow by you with a power fastball and a lot of really good breaking stuff that produces whiffs. So I do think this 25% K rate is going to come into play, and Sale's going to have a really good start. So I will not mind backing him in that start. So I'm good there. It's pretty much all I got. Seattle versus Washington, Mariners Nats is like a really good series if you love pitching matchups, because maybe this was first episode I did here. I liked a lot of the pitching matchups in the Red Sox Rays series, which I specifically pointed out two unders, and those happen to be the two ones that smacked in the series. I feel pretty similar about this series here, which, I mean, these are great pitching matchups. If you want pitching matchups, if you want to see good pitching for 3 straight games, turn on this series. George Kirby, Mackenzie Gore, solid matchup game one. Logan Gilbert, Trevor Williams, Brian Wu, Mitchell Parker. These are 3 pitchers that I would love to see in a 3-game sample set, and we're getting that. So I do think this is a series to target plenty of unders. I love the under game one. Can't really decide between game 2 or game 3 which one I would potentially like better, but same goes, because the Mariners, I'll say this because they're on the road here. When the Mariners are on the road, their offense is very home run reliant. And not that that changes all that much when they're at home either. It's just kind of the offense they are, but especially when they've been on the road. They've been very home run reliant. And you see Mackenzie Gore, Trevor Williams, Mitchell Parker, 3 pitchers who have been very good for the Nationals at keeping the ball in the ballpark. 2 of them are from the left side, where the Mariners have been a little better, yes, but that's not where the majority of their power comes from. So I do think the Nats can be very sneaky in the series. Like, if we're talking about series prices, I should have brought those up a little earlier. But the Nationals are plus 200 in this series. I kind of pointed it out in the Twin series as well, which they're very close to that. But I was hinging a little more on the bats in that Twin series, or the Nationals bats in the Twin series kind of coming to life. This one feels a little different because I feel like every game is going to be close because of the pitching matchups that we see. So we're staring at a plus 200 for the Nationals here, and I do think that's worth it. And like I want to get involved maybe game 1 with taking the Nationals, and then flip a coin between game 1 and game 2, or game 2 and game 3. Sorry. Which one of those you think they could sneak as well? And I just think all these games are going to be tight till the end. So like I think that's a solid value play at the very least. But again, series of unders, series of just really, really good pitching matchups that I'm excited to watch personally. So we move from there. Royals Rays. Don't know if I love the Rays in this series. Feels like kind of a tough spot. And I can just single out the Royals pitchers first. I mean, Seth Lugo is the build of a pitcher who just absolutely destroys the Rays. Michael Wacha as well, even though he hasn't been great, he has started to turn a corner a little bit with better stuff. They've seen him a little bit though, but he has pitched really good against them. The one hope I guess I maybe have is Brady Singer, but again, who knows what we're going to get from him. The real like concern for me for the Rays in this comes from the pitching because game one, Sean Armstrong, who I mean has been awful as an opener in the first place. He's going to be opening for Tyler Alexander. Tyler Alexander's coming off of his perfect game bid that ended in the eighth inning. So I mean, he was lights out against the Blue Jays, and the Royals are on the road here, and they're in the Trop. They usually demolish lefties at home, even though that's subsided like a little bit. I do think it's hard not to expect some regression in this next start from Tyler Alexander. So I'm a little worried there, but also, I mean, game two, Aaron Savali. I'm an Aaron Savali guy, but the dude has a home run problem. He has a barrel problem. He'll go and have a solid start for a majority of the start, and then fourth inning, he gets blown up. Uh, it's just kind of what happens. And just like I talked about when I guess it was the Casey Mize discussion, the Royals hit the ball hard and they hit the ball in the air, especially against right-handed pitching. So that's exactly what you need to get to Aaron Savali. So I'm very worried that we're going to get a Bobby Witt legacy performance. Maybe Salvi continues his unreal season, or we see a Vinny P. Tank or Michael Massey, who's had a couple big home runs in the spot against Aaron Savali. That feels like a solid game to target the Royals bats. So yeah, I'm a little worried that game one and game two kind of set the tempo for the series, set the tone for the series. And I don't like the direction that would be heading for the Rays. Taj Bradley starts Sunday, though, so maybe he gets a bounce back performance after struggling towards the end of his outing last week or earlier this week. But other than that, a little worried there. We can move to Great American Ballpark. This is a tough series because it is a series that just happened, and usually I love targeting those series to kind of flip-flop. I don't think the Reds are going to win the series. I mean, hot take there, but I do think at the very least we get a turkey fest in game one. I do like that over Paxton and Ashcraft. So, I mean, we're talking about same James Paxton. I mean, he's been due for so much regression throughout the season. I mean, he's put up great numbers so far, but regression is looming around the corner. A lot of the expected numbers are very bad, especially for a guy who doesn't generate many whiffs. So, I mean, he just faced the Reds last week. He gave up three, only struck two of them out. So, like the whiffs are not going to be there, especially after seeing him for a second time within a week. This lineup for the Reds, this unhealthy version of the Reds, part of it has been that now they suffer against right-handed pitching, but they've gotten better against left-handed pitching just because that's who they have to throw out there. So a guy like Tyler Stevenson, who I believe had a home run in that game against James Paxton, kind of profiles perfectly for this matchup, other than the fact that he's been absolutely demolishing the baseball. One of the best hard hit rates or highest hard hit rates in all of baseball right now, sneakily. He's been fantastic. So I think him in the middle of that lineup would do wonders in this game, or will do wonders in this game. So I mean, that's really the one game where I want to back Reds runs in this series. Other than that, it's kind of tough. I will say, Trent always says the two times you do not back the Dodgers are interdivisional matchups and in the daytime. And not only are they getting a daytime game on Sunday, but it's going to be a 9:40 a.m. local time game for the Dodgers against Andrew Abbott, who has been damn good over the past, really all season, but especially like over the past handful of starts. So I do think he has a really solid performance, and same goes for Hunter Green on Saturday. So I wouldn't mind leaning into the Reds pitching. The problem with, just backing the Reds period in those two starts is I don't know if their offense is going to be there all that much either. I think that sets up for a really good Yamamoto start on that Sunday too. So maybe a little Sunday under early in that game, or for that early game, I guess you could say. But yeah, that's I do like runs game one. Do like the Dodgers to maybe fall flat game three against Abbott, but I'm not so sure that the Reds offense will show up all that much either. So definitely would be targeting some pitchers in the back end of that series for sure. Can move to the second crop of series. Start with the Giants Mets. Not many thoughts on this one. I talked about just avoiding the Giants, whether I'm fading or backing them, which I guess I'm not avoiding fading them. They just happen to be playing the Mets, who I don't have too much interest in getting involved with either. I will say Christian Scott definitely profiles as a guy who's going to pitch really well against this Giants lineup. So if you're backing him game one, I will not get too mad at you, period. Again, Giants bullpen also in a really tough spot. So maybe the Mets get some late runs. Again, can't fault you for that. But other than that, there's no matchups that I would say jump off the page for me, whether it's Hicks Severino game 2 or Logan Webb, Sean Manaea game 3. Think I'm good there. Wouldn't be surprised if we see a weird Logan Webb start on the road against Sean Manaea, where we see a sneak moose fest because the Mets have already faced him when they're a little better in San Francisco. He absolutely dealt against them, and now he's gone on the road where he's very obviously not as good. So we'll see how that kind of shakes out. Um, but yeah, not too much there. Same story here with Rangers Twins. I wish I had, more confidence on this series, but like I talked about with the Giants, the Rangers are in the same boat. Offense has been terrible. If you're talking about matchups like Bailey O'Bear, and I guess you could say Chris Paddock, like there are two games where on paper, I think they set up really well for a bounce back performance for the Rangers. But the problem is they've been having these matchups for the past 3 weeks and they've been god awful. So like I have no real interest in getting involved. Um, I think you're going to have pretty good hitting conditions this weekend as well. So, like, maybe that gives them the extra push that they need in these matchups to kind of get themselves over the hump and put up some runs. But it's tough to have any confidence in this Rangers team right now. So I'm good. I wish I had more on that series. I wish I was super excited to get involved in that series. I think that's a pretty fun series, or at least it should be. Can't put my confidence on the Rangers right now. But if you do have the stomach to back it, I do think there's some avenues for the Rangers to wake the bats up in the first two games of that series. Move to Milwaukee, Boston. Not too many thoughts here either. Bryce Wilson, Cutter Crawford is a very interesting matchup game one. I'm staring at a 9.5 total in that game, which I think is awfully high. So maybe indicative of what to expect there, the game with Cutter Crawford involved. But I do think this is another really big series for Rafael Devers. Bryce Wilson going game one. Not that he's going to go for very long. They put him in for 3-4 innings. They kind of make sure they know when to take him out, and the bullpen's been solid behind him, but allows a lot of power to left-handed batters. And same goes for a lot of the pitchers that the Brewers are going to throw out there. Not sure who's going to go Sunday just yet, but Colin Rea can be kind of fit in that same mold. So Rafael Devers, I think he's going to have to continue to have a really big series because other than that, the Red Sox are very thin in these matchups, particularly because there's not many other power lefties that you have in that lineup right now. And that's how you get to a couple of these pitchers that they're going to see. So big series for him, maybe not for many others. I do kind of like the Brewers in that series, but not going to go to the grave with that. I guess this whole page of series is all series that I don't love to get involved in. Orioles, White Sox, already talked about that. Already started game one. Orioles took that 8-6. Worst call I've ever seen on a baseball field, by the way, with that interference double play to end the game. But it's beside the point. Again, I think the Orioles will be very overpriced in this series. Definitely like Corbin Burns flexing is going to be, and I'm fine leaning on Corbin Burns, but the Dean Kramer Fetty matchups, the Braddock Crochet matchups, I mean, they're going to be massive favorites, probably bigger than they should. So, like, I'm not going to get involved there. I do think there's an avenue for the White Sox to steal one of those games potentially, especially with how good, Fetty and Crochet have been in certain spots. So, keep me away from that because that feels like a really tough White Sox are going to steal coin at some point in that series spot. The weird series that I guess I have the most interest on or interest in on the page is this Cubs Cardinal series, which I think it's a little odd that we do see the Cardinals favored in this series. Not by too much, but they are, minus 115 favorites, which again, the Cubs have not been playing good ball. The Cardinals have been playing a little better as of recently. So you could say maybe that's a little bit of the reason, plus the fact that we're getting a Sonny Gray start on Sunday where he's going to be a pretty decent favorite, I would think, even though like Javier Assad's on the other side, who the Cubs find a way to win every single time that guy takes the mound. But you have Shota on the mound in game one against Miles Michaelis, of all people, and that line is awfully short coming down. I think he opened just north or just south of minus 150, and that line has plummeted ever since to I think we're touching minus 140 now, probably going to get lower. Feels pretty indicative. And I'm a very, very big do not fade Shota in the starts person, and I've been very successful in doing that. But the thing is, like, Shota can pitch a really good game. The way this Cubs offense is going right now, I can't even trust them against Miles Michaelis. So I do think at the very least, this is a game they keep very close. I don't know if the plus 1.5 is in like a bettable range, but it feels like one of those games where maybe it's even worth it to lay that. Um, but I do think the Cardinals are very live in this series. I do think maybe they get the one of the very few teams to beat Shota Imanaga in the start in this game one Friday series. And then that Assad Grace, I mean, that's going to be a great pitching matchup too. It's also Sunday Night Baseball, I believe, which I mean, I love taking Sunday Night Baseball unders, period, but that one specifically just screams, really good matchup with two anemic offenses. The Cubs are, they've been printing unders for a couple weeks now. It's not a trend that I want to go and try and be sharp and take overs necessarily a lot of the time. And so I'm going to keep riding some of those unders. That feels like a really good one to target. So watch out. Watch out for the Cards this series. I'm not buying back into the resurgence just yet, but the Cubs are trending in quite the opposite direction. So do not hate targeting them at all. Can move to the last batch because this is the most interesting batch, of course. The Phillies are going to play the Rockies in Coors. Phillies have been one of the best teams in baseball, for I don't know how long, the last month and a half. They've been rolling. People have been bitching about their schedule, which I get it. They've been playing soft teams, but I guess it doesn't really stop here with the Rockies. But if you have been watching this team, I don't think it's just a product of the teams they're playing opposite them. They just look really good. They look dialed in at the plate right now, even in some tougher matchups or what would seem that way. They've found a way to score plenty of runs. They have that late inning magic. So now they're going to play the Rockies. I told you about the bullpen situation. I think this is a horrendous spot, not only because the bullpen's in shambles for the Rockies and it's awful as it stands. So now late in runs are going to be plentiful in this series. Look who they have going the first two games. Ty Black, who is a guy who's given them 3, 4, and 5 innings at the max. He's not a fully stretched out pitcher, not a fully stretched out starter. He's more of a converted bullpen guy that they're bringing in for like bulk type outings. And then same with Dakota Hudson, who does not give them any depth in games whatsoever. So not only is the bullpen compromised coming into the series, but they don't have any real starters that they're putting out until Cal Quantrill on the Sunday start, which he can pitch kind of well. That's also, I don't think supposed to say Sanchez for game 3. Can change that, but TBD because I don't know off the top of my head, but or I think it's no, I don't know off the top of my head, but you get the point. Terrible spot, and I would love to think that the Phillies magic is going to end at some point. I can't see a reason or can't see a way that their bats at least do not destroy the Rockies for the first 2 games of the series. I really couldn't tell you like which game would be better suited for them either, because I guess you could say like I want to target them and target their bats coming into this series when the bullpen is at the lowest point, surely. But Dakota Hudson is also god awful. So like I couldn't tell you what seems better. They are facing a lefty, which they stand right here, 5th in the MLB, WRC plus against lefties so far this season. Don't strike out. They're walking a lot. So like not that Ty Black is going to go for 6 innings or anything. He's probably going to give 3 or 4. Maybe the leash is a little longer because they need it to be. But they're going to touch him up early and often. And same goes for Dakota Hudson. So the Phillies, the magic is going to keep continuing for everybody who's been just auto betting them every game. I don't see a reason to stop. So before we go to a somewhat similar situation, Astros A's, can make a quick stop at Guardians Angels because it's not my favorite series, but it's an interesting series, I think, especially because we have the Angels who've been playing like decent baseball lately. They've been one of the more entertaining bad teams to watch for the past couple of weeks, especially in that Astros series, which the one thing they did in that series particularly, there's a couple pitchers, and Christian Javier Framber can be a name here. Like they give up a lot of hard contact, and that hasn't really bit them in the ass. The Angels have been really good at making those specific pitchers pay. And who do they get game 1? They get Logan Allen, who I always call a barrel machine, and his downfall probably needs to be studied. But he's been flat out bad for the entirety of this season, and he's been a guy that I've been targeting pretty heavily and fading pretty heavily. Now, does it make me, or does it Do I love that the Angels are kind of middle of the pack against lefties? No, not really. They're pretty aggressive, and the thing is, they're not striking out really all that much, which I guess could be huge for Logan Allen. But um, I think this is between him and Reed Detmers, who is going game 3 here. Those are two pitchers' downfalls that I'm going to keep betting on. Reed Detmers has given up 28 earned runs in his last 5 starts, which is obscene for a guy with that stuff and that talent. And he's had like a couple of soft matchups really put in there as well. The Angels, the way they're seeing the ball right now, like it's going to come to an end at some point, but I do want to keep riding that train, surely. So I do think there's avenues for offense. The Angels in game 1, the Guardians in game 3. I don't really know what we're going to get from Bybee and Joel Soriano. Soriano, I think I took under strikeouts the last time that he faced the Guardians for obvious reasons. Always target under strikeouts for guys who live in the zone with off speed against the Guardians. So maybe running that back, but really dialing in for game 1 and game 3. Now we can move to Houston and Oakland. Again, parallel situation, I believe, to Phillies, Rockies. Talked about the bullpens. The A's bullpen is an absolute shambles. And I'll say this: am I in love with Verlander, Arrighetti, and Ronel Blanco? No, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm really not, especially Arrighetti against Series in game 2. But there's going to be one of these games between game 1 against Stripling and game 3 against Aaron Brooks where the Astros are going to put up 10 runs and win by a million. Like, I think, first of all, the way that I would like to approach this Phillies Astros situation, because I have a real hard time pushing the moneyline parlay button that I'm sure plenty of people are going to be pushing, at some point today. But team total overs is probably, I don't want to call it safe because it's never safe, but that's the way that I think is best suited to attack these offenses. But if you want to shoot for the moon here and get a lot of value, I think you ladder the Phillies and Rockies, or ladder the Phillies against the Rockies, game 1, game 2. You ladder the Astros against the A's, game 1, game 3. I think each of them, first of all, in game 1, starting today, I think you get one minimum from either of those teams where it's a really disgusting performance and they blow them out. But I think you get minimum 1 from them in each of those series. It's like I think you're coming out with coin if you're taking a run line minus 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, however high you want to go. One of those I think minimum is happening for each team in the series, and I think one of them is definitely happening in game 1 between those two teams. You can start with, like, if we're talking about the Astros specifically here, because I already went through the Phillies. Ross Stripling, while he did just see him, I think a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and actually pitched pretty well, 5 innings, I think give up 3 runs. You know what the problem that is? He just saw them. So in the first place, Ross Stripling, they utilize him kind of weird. Like he's gone out and given them 100 pitches sometimes, and sometimes they'll pull him with 50 pitches. They use him or utilize him as needed. So he's probably going to have a little bit longer of a leash today. You kind of know that, but he's going to have to go right at these hitters. You can't afford to nibble around the zone and walk guys because the pitch count can't get high because their bullpen's super compromised, like I've been preaching on. So that's going to be a big time problem. So, the Astros are going to be able to adjust to him. He also is very, very bad in the first place. And he has no choice but to attack these hitters dead on. And if Jordan Alvarez does not have a home run in this series, especially in game 1 and game 3, I don't know what to say. Same with Kyle Tucker because he's been red hot as of lately, but the matchups are just so beautiful for them up and down this series. I don't see a world where the offense doesn't show up a majority of the series, but especially game 1, game 3. Can't rule out the JP Sears start too because he does have heavy reverse splits. I give him the benefit of the doubt because he's the best arm on that staff, best starting arm on that staff. But yeah, they've seen him plenty, can attack him plenty. So I mean, the Astros bats, they've won 10 of 14. I'm willing to say that they're going to keep getting hot, and I still think they win the AL West when everything's said and done. This feels like a big star where they kind of say, you know what, we're here. Not that anybody's taking the A's serious as this contender or anything, but they need just a absolute destruction of some pitching staffs to really get themselves back on track. This feels like it. So Phillies, Astros, couldn't be better situations coming into the series for the bats. I'm going to attack them a lot of different ways. So those are pretty much the big time angles I have in the series. I can go through these couple, like Marlins D-backs, they don't have all that much. The D-backs, not playing great baseball right now, so I do feel like there's going to be a game or two of the Marlins stealing this series, and not really going to expect it. I would love if it happens to be against Zach Gallen. I do think he gives up a turkey or two to a Jazz or a Brylan De La Cruz, but other than that, probably going to have a pretty decent start. Uh, Jordan Montgomery is going to have a really good start against Sixto Sanchez. That one could probably get ugly. The Marlins have been pitiful against lefties. So that's probably going to hold itself up there. I wouldn't be shocked to see a pretty decent Ryan Weathers start, though. So maybe if they're going to sneak one, it's the Sunday game. But I don't really have a matchup that's screaming at me in this Marlins series. Uh, and then this Padres-Yankee series is interesting because we're going to get Rodon in game one. And I've talked about this a couple of times. I think especially last time out, Padres Reds, when I was really loving Andrew Abbott. Padres have been so bad against left-handed pitching that I've been targeting them pretty much every single time a lefties come on the mound. You get one in Rodon and one in Rodon that's been very good. But some of his numbers do indicate regression, and it's more of like a gut thing than anything, but like a lot of those regression spots where these pitchers have been really good and they've had terrible matchups, but they found ways to be successful. Um, when those spots come to a head or when the regression starts to show itself, tends to be in the spots that you least expect it matchup wise. So against the Padres team, who is really bad against left-handed pitching, that wouldn't shock me. That's more of a gut feeling more than anything. Which again, like I think that's going to be a pretty low-scoring game. Game one of the series, I think we have 7.5 total. So how bad do you have to be for the Padres to win that game? Not very. If Darvish goes out and pitches well, so that's just kind of the gut feeling I'm getting about this game. I do think it's kind of a weird series for the Yankees to be going out there on the West Coast and facing a solid slate of pitchers. Obviously, you're not in love with Joe Musgrove, but C's coming off a rough outing, I believe, but he has the stuff and he's shown, everything in his power most of this season that he's going to be a really good pitcher in that rotation. The stuff's been great. And the Yankees offense hasn't been all that impressive lately. And I was targeting them in certain spots in that Mariners series. They got it going towards the end of it, but the bats weren't fantastic, I'll say, and in spots that they really should have been. Obviously, you got the Soto 2 home run performance. Judge shows up, but other than that, the rest of that lineup just really isn't doing it for me right now. And this Padres, going out the West Coast with games against Darvish and C's, that doesn't give me too much confidence if I'm involved in backing the Yankees. And I am interested to see. I actually haven't taken a look at the series price yet for the Yankees. That feels awfully short. I'm not going to lie to you. Minus 115 favorites. When you have Rodon on the mound, who's been fantastic. You got Stroman, who's also been fantastic. And then big mismatch with Clark Schmidt and Joe Musgrove. So the Padres being just about at a pick 'em feels a little odd for that series. Maybe it's one that's better targeted on a game-to-game basis, but that does feel like a pretty telling series price. So interesting there, but that is pretty much all I have for this series or this series preview, these weekend slate games. These help me. I mean, as much as I hope they're helping some of you guys, because especially on the weekend series, I love to just have a plan going in. So I'm not getting in the lab super hard on like a Saturday, Sunday morning or afternoon. So you kind of dive into those before and ahead of time. So we know exactly what we're doing. But theme of the weekend for me has got to be finding the spots where the Phillies are going to absolutely destroy the Rockies and where the Astros are going to absolutely destroy the Athletics. And that doesn't make me feel comfortable. That's probably the squarest couple angles that you're going to hear me say all season potentially. But with the spots they're in, I just can't see all that much else happening in these series. So I'm going to find my ways. We're going to talk about it on BTL starting Friday. I guess you guys will probably be watching BTL by the time this comes out, but we'll have plenty of stuff out. I'll definitely be doing my fair share of stuff on the weekends as well. We'll be tapped in to kind of find which specific ways to fade both these pitching staffs, but appreciate you guys for joining, for watching, hopefully all the way through. Make sure you're tuned into BTL Friday, of course, but next week as well, so we can talk about some plays. Good luck on your bets this week and weekend, and let's find some winners because I think we have a really good setup for a bunch of them. Let's fade the Rockies. Let's fade the A's. And let's call it a weekend.